Attention, we have heard from the control center on Monster Island that the two monsters, Godzilla and Anguillus, have broken out. They are said to be heading for the Kaiju district. All men stand by.
People, LP2000 right back at you with another video. Yes, welcome back. Welcome back to another edition of Leslie Chambers Kaiju Reviews on behalf of Collectible Monsters. And man, it's been a minute. It's been a long minute since I put my last video out. I think it's been like 2 or 3 weeks to a month. Oh God almighty. But I've been teasing this guy for the longest time, and I'm sorry it's taken me so long to finally get to this guy, but better late than never. But you already clicked the title, you know exactly who we're covering here in this awesome figure review. So let's stop procrastinating, let's stop wasting time, let's dive head first into this awesome 50cm resin model kit review. And today we take a look at the Tengetsu Crafts 50cm resin model kit of the 1971 Godzilla, but I had it morphed and modified into the 1972 Godzilla based on his super cool appearance in my second most favorite Godzilla film of all time, coincidentally celebrating the 50th anniversary this year, 1972's Godzilla vs. Gigan. As you can see, I have the beautiful, yes I said beautiful, of the king of the monsters that took on the weird looking space chicken from 1972's Godzilla vs. Gigan in all his glory. And oh my God, this thing is so amazing. Again, 50 centimeters tall. That is 20 inches tall of a superhero version of Godzilla from the 70s. And you already know, I love the 1970s Godzilla films. I love the 1970s versions of Godzilla. So this is such a welcome addition into my collection. Now, let me give a huge shout out and thank you to 2 special people for making this video happen. First and foremost, Charles Blankenship. I got this kit through him, so thank you so much, good sir. And also Mark Seng. Again, you've heard his name on my channel many times before. an awesome, brilliant Kaiju sculptor, kit builder, all that good stuff. He built and painted this kit for me. So again, thank you to Mark Seng and thank you to Charles Blankenship for making this happen. Now, here's the windy backstory for me getting this kit into my possession. Now, this is from Tengetsu Crafts. Tengetsu Crafts is a model kit company, no different than KOC or NOA Arts or Monster Maker 28 or Goro or Size OK or whatever. And they've done a few Godzilla sculptures under their belt, you know what I mean? And this guy came out, I want to say, sometime last year. It kind of slipped under my radar, kind of like the Resin Chef Mega Gyarus. That kit came out last year as well, and I kind of found out after the fact. Actually, I want to give a huge shout out and thank you to Gojira 851, because he was the one that actually brought this kit to my awareness. Because he and I and a few other friends of mine have this private chat that we talk about basically just random stuff, Godzilla, personal stuff, or whatever. And I think last year, it was either last year or earlier this year, he showed a photograph of this kit. And when I first saw it, I was like, wow, finally, a gigantic sized version of a superhero version of Godzilla. And when I first saw the photograph, I thought it was a 72. Upon doing research, it's actually the 71. You know what I mean? And again, go back to Tengetsu Crafts. Again, it's a model kit company, you know, whatever. A good chunk of their sculpts I'm not really a big fan of. They don't look all too well to me. They're not as pristine as, you know, Monster Maker 28 sculpts or maybe Goro sculpts, you know, or whatever. But there are a few kits that they have on their roster that I wouldn't mind having in my collection. First and foremost, they did a kit where it's an artistic poster of Godzilla vs. Biollante. Remember that artistic poster where you have Godzilla in the foreground and the big giant monstrous flower Biollante in the background? They actually have a kit depicting that poster. So I wouldn't mind having that in my collection. They did one of a 30cm 1966 Godzilla from Godzilla vs. the Sea Monster. As a matter of fact, I'm going to plug Iconic Repaints on YouTube. It's a channel that where he specializes in building paint model kits, kind of like Mark Seng, and he documents the progress or whatever. And he did a kit of the Tengetsu Crafts 30cm 1966 Godzilla. And it's Godzilla where he looks like towards the latter half of the film, where he kind of looks kind of shoddy or he looks like he's on drugs. But say what you will about that version of Godzilla, I would love to have that version of Godzilla in my collection as well. And the sculpt, even though it's shoddy, even though it's kind of funky looking, looks exactly like that version of Godzilla towards the latter half of Godzilla vs. the Sea Monster. So I wouldn't mind having that in my collection. And they did, I think, a double set, I think a 25 or 30cm, I'm not really sure, coincidentally, of Godzilla and Gigan from Godzilla vs. Gigan. And it recreates the poster where Gigan is like on this hill, on this mount at Children's Land, and Godzilla's like below him, trying to tackle him, you know, whatever. So that is a really, really cool kit I would mind having in my collection. But by and large, again, a good chunk of Tengetsu Crafts sculpts are not really the best in the world. But I think in regards to this version of Godzilla, it actually works to the sculpt's advantage, at least to this version of Godzilla's advantage. More on that later. And fast forward to, I want to say, April or May of this year. And I hit up Charles Blankenship and I asked him, I was like, you know, do you have any more model kits you don't mind selling me? Because he sold me the Resin Chef Mega Gyarus. He sold me the 40cm resin model kit of the King Goji from KOC. And again, I've been on a model kit tear as of late. So I asked him, I was like, look, do you have any model kits that you may want to part with? And he gave me a short list of stuff that he was thinking about selling. And this one jumped out at me. He had this for sale. And I wasted no time and wanted to know more about that kit. And he warned me that, honestly, even though, again, Mark Seng did a great job on building and painting this kit, but the road to build and painting this kit was kind of rough. Because what I understand, the guy who made the kit or produced the kit kind of rushed the kit, from what I understand. And when I started putting feelers out there from people who already had this kit, because mind you, there's not many of this kit out there. From what I understand, he made maybe like 11. but it's a real small quantity. I don't know how true the 11 number is, but what I understand, this kit is not in large quantities. So only a handful of people, or a couple people that I knew personally, had this kit. So I reached out to them and I asked them, like, look, is it worth going after? And they were pretty much brutally honest and said, it just depends. It just depends on if you're going to paint it, or if you know what you're doing, if you're going to paint it, or if you know somebody that does know what they're doing. Just keep in mind that they got a long road ahead of them. Because from what I understand, the guy rushed this kit into production, and some of the pieces didn't flow right together when you tried to assemble it, you know, and it required more surgery to put it together and have it look right, you know, if you get my meaning. And so after getting feelings from people and deciding whether I wanted this kit or not, I was like, you know, I'm gonna go for it. And so I contacted Mark and I told him all the issues that this kit supposedly had. And I made him aware, like, look, this is not gonna be a walk in the park for you. Even though he's a Jedi master when it comes to building and painting model kits, I told him point blank, like, look, you might have to work a little bit harder to get this thing done. And I don't mind paying you extra to get that done. And he was like, you know what, I'm up for the challenge, and I don't mind doing this for you. And so I struck a deal with Charles. He sent the kit to Mark, and he built and painted for me. And I want to say around a 2 or 3 week turnaround, and Mark created this thing for me. Now, again, this is a 1971. Technically, this kit is of the 1971 Godzilla from Hedra. But again, since I'm such a huge fan of Godzilla vs. Gigan, and I'm a huge fan of Godzilla himself, the suit from Godzilla vs. Gigan, again, I asked Mark, could he morph it or modify it into the 1972, which is why he gave him that awesome wound at the crest of his head. You know what I mean? And Mark said, you know what, I had no problem doing that. He gave the suit a darker charcoal gray coloring on the skin and silver paint scheme on the dorsal plates, because that's how the 1972 Godzilla suit was. And I think he did a phenomenal job. He did an awesome job with what I wanted him to do in making this guy in the 1972 Godzilla. More on that later. Because honestly, the genesis of me wanting to have a gigantic sized version of a superhero version of Godzilla from the 70s really started with the X Plus Gigantic series. Because you already know, I am a huge fan of the X Plus Gigantic series. It's my favorite line of figures from X Plus. Probably my favorite line of figures of all time, if you really think about it. And I pretty much have every single one of them in the series. But when you look at that series, outside of the MonsterVerse, right? Outside of the MonsterVerse, pretty much every single version of Godzilla that's represented in the X Plus Gigantic series is either when he's a villain or an anti-hero. 54, 95, Shin, 89, 64, 62, the 2000, right? And all those versions of Godzilla, again, are either villains or anti-heroes. You know, not the goofy superhero one that we grew up on in the 70s. And I've always told my great friend from Collect All Monsters, fellow co-host from Collect All Monsters, and great friend of mine, MyKaijus.com, John Ruffin, because he feels the same way about the 1970s Godzilla films and Godzilla himself as I do. We've always said, you know what, we need to have a representation of the superhero Godzilla for the 70s in the Gigantic series, or at least a Gigantic series form, or Gigantic size form, I should say. Now, they do have a megaton from Marmot of a giant sized version of the 71 Godzilla, you know, coincidentally, a 71 Godzilla. But we don't have anything that's of a realistic style of a superhero version of Godzilla from the 70s until now. And that is a long-winded backstory with me getting this guy into my collection, and how ironic that I was able to score this guy, had it morphed into the 1972 Godzilla on the 50th anniversary of Godzilla vs. Gigan. And again, so that is the long-winded backstory for me getting this guy, and that's pretty much it. Now let's get up close and personal with this guy, and this guy is awesome. Once again, this is the 50cm Resin model kit of the Tengetsu Crafts 1971 Godzilla. Again, I had it morphed into the 1972 Godzilla. Right off the bat, the sculpt looks great. The sculpt looks like the Shoshin Godzilla suit. Because that's basically what the 72 suit was. It was just a variation of the 71 suit, which was a variation of the 69 suit, which was a variation of the 68 suit. And it looks really great. Now, going back to the sculpt, because remember, I talked about how the sculpts from Tengetsu Crafts, at least in my opinion, they're not really good. They're not really pristine and crisp, you know, whatever. And the kit was like this. where the sculpt wasn't really crisp. Like the tree bark skin on Godzilla here was not as crisp as it was on the actual 68 suit, which was the first time this suit was used. So of course the suit's gonna be crisp and looking new and looking all good, all that good stuff. So by the time we get the Gigan, you know, the symmetrical tree bark skin of Godzilla is really shoddy in places. It doesn't look brand new, and quite frankly, consider what this suit went through at battling Hedra, Gabara, and King Ghidorah and all that good stuff. You kind of have to understand that this suit would look like that towards the tail end, you know? But the sculpt, I think, looks great. I think the sculpt really benefits this version of Godzilla because, again, there were scenes in Gigan where we actually see porcelain or the suit dangling on his suit. There are times where he's either punching Gigan or King Ghidorah. You see some flesh parts just flailing up into the air, you know? Seriously, this suit was running on fumes by the time we got to Gigan. But the sculpt here, the fact that it doesn't have a pristine look when it comes to the skin, I think really benefits the this version of Godzilla, and it really comes across as the 72. And again, I make no bones about the fact that when it comes to the variation of the Shoshingeki suit, the 72 is my favorite. I don't know what they did. I don't know what they did to make it look really cool in 1972, but I so love this version of Godzilla, more so than 71, more so than 69, more so than 68, and I will die on that hill. I will defend this suit until I have no breath in my body. And consider how big I am, that's going to be a long time from now. But the sculpt looks great. The sculpt looks really, really great. The tree bark skin, you know, the worn down bumps on the tree bark skin looks really, really, really good. His pose, again, with his arms up, typical Godzilla around this part of the series, you know, superhero Godzilla. You know, he's about to attack something or defend himself, you know, whatever. Godzilla was really expressive with a lot of gestures, you know, between 71 and this suit. You know, Nakajima did his thing in his last two performances, you know. And consider the fact that it's rumored that he really kind of lost the will, I guess, or at least the motivation to continue on, because around 1970, that's when Eiji Tsuburaya passed away. It was rumored, or at least it's documented, that Haruo Nakajima kind of like lost the nerve, or at least lost the motivation to continue on as Godzilla. You know, he kind of had to be talked into doing both Hedra and Gigan. But when you look at both Hedra and Gigan, you can hardly even tell that he needed motivation, because he gives an awesome performance as Godzilla in those two films. He's very expressive, like I said. He does a lot of gestures, you know, and you can really see that in this sculpt. Like, this is all Nakajima in the sculpt of this version of Godzilla. So that looks really, really good. The toe scheme looks really good, the three-toe scheme. And again, this is the superhero version of Godzilla, so his feet are not wide and massive and have the claws all menacing looking like he did in 64 or maybe 54, you know, whatever. You know what? I love the feet of the superhero Godzilla. Like, I love the feet from 68 all the way to 75. Like, it's something about the feet. You know, how the toes are like bunched together like this. It doesn't come across as menacing. Again, it comes across as friendly, which is what this Godzilla is supposed to be. So I do like this look on his toes. Looks really, really good. Let's go to the tail. The tail looks really good, sculpted really well. The tail was really not that long in this version of Godzilla, if you really think about it. It wasn't as long as the 64s or maybe the 54s, you know, whatever. They kind of shortened the tail up a little bit, which is kind of understandable since this Godzilla did do a lot of physical fighting, and it probably wouldn't be beneficial towards the suit actor if he had like a long tail like, you know, Shen's or the 89s, you know, whatever. So I love how they shortened the tail on the suit, and it's really reminiscent here on this sculpt. So it looks really, really good. The dorsal plates, again, this is all Shoshingeki Godzilla dorsal plates. You know, from the shapes, you know, from the first plate to the second to the big one on his back, you know, whatever. Looks really, really good. Let's go towards the face. Again, that is the 72 Godzilla. Oh my God. Individually sculpted teeth. The mouth is sculpted really well. Looks really, really amazing. And again, I don't know what they did with the 72 to make it look so good. I kind of have an idea. I'm just guessing here. But again, they had to modify it from Hedra, because we all know the 71 suit went through went through hell and back fighting Hedra. And by the time we got out of Hedra, that suit was so worn down. It's kind of lucky that we got an appearance from this suit in the next film, you know? But again, they had to modify it as best as they could, because remember in Hedra, he was missing the eye, one of his hands was charged to bone, the suit was dirty from being drenched with sludge and being wrestling around with Hedra, so they had to modify the best they could. They had to make it look presentable the best they could. So I think they did a good job, you know, whatever. But going back to the face looked great. The eyes look menacing. I think that's probably the reason why I love this version of Godzilla the most when it comes to Shingeki Godzilla suit. It's just the eyes look menacing, you know. They're not as big as the 68s. They kind of squinted just a little bit where he comes across. It's a little bit menacing. I think they changed the brow a little bit, kind of like what they did from 75, from 74. They did a great job. So again, the sculpt looks great, from the teeth, individually sculpt the teeth, you know, the way the mouth is sculpted, you know, the brow, the eyes, the arms, the dorsal plates, the tail, the feet. Looks really great. Now let's go towards the paint job. And again, I've always said when it comes to a model kit, the two most important things that has to be right is the sculpt and the paint job. The sculpt looks great. It gets my seal of approval. So now let's go towards the paint job. But you already know, spoiler alert, it's going to get my seal of approval. It's from Mark Seng. It's from Mark Seng. He always does a fabulous job. I have never been disappointed with anything that guy has done just yet. And again, he has not out of the park with this paint job. And really simple. You know, with the dark charcoal gray skin of Godzilla. Again, I think they made it a darker color in 72, because in 71 he looks more so. Now it's charcoal gray, but it's kind of like lighter in tone a little bit. Maybe it's the way the film was shot, you know, whatever. But when you look at Gigan, his appearance in Gigan, the suit is a little bit darker, you know. And they made the dorsal plates, you know, with the silver sheen, which I really do enjoy. So the paint job on the majority of the body, dark charcoal gray from his head, his hands, the bulk of his body, his tail, looks really good. The toes, going back to the feet. Man, I love the feet. I really do. The toenails, as well as his claws, dirty bone white. Again, kind of like what we saw in the Showa period anyway. Again, the dorsal plates, the correct color of silver sheen, you know, which looks really good. He pretty much got every dorsal plate from basically from the top of his head all the way to the tip of his tail. Looks really good. The mouth is colored really well. Dirty bone white teeth. You know, the mouth is colored really well with the red of his tongue and in the interior of his mouth, his upper jaw and lower jaw. Looks really good. The eyes are colored really well. Again, the eyes, the pupils looks really menacing. All 72 if you ask me. But this right here, the wound, that right there is what sets this Godzilla apart from the other Godzillas, you know, at least from the other version of the Shingeki suit. Because when you look at that wound, you know exactly where it comes from. It comes from Gigan opening him up or making him bleed for the first time. And I think Mark Seng did a phenomenal job. Going back to the X Plus 25 centimeter 1972 Showdown set that I got earlier, a couple months ago, that had, you know, the modified 71 25 centimeter Godzilla figure. You know, they just made it at 72 by adding some paint, you know, whatever. Which is a great set, and I highly recommend it if you're able to find one on the aftermarket. But the biggest complaint, at least one of the biggest complaints when it comes to that set, in regards to Godzilla himself, some people think that the wound that they gave him didn't look too authentic. You know, it was kind of phoned in. I don't think so. I think the wound looks great for what it is, or good for what it is. But the wound here looks phenomenal. Like, this is my opinion. If you want to make a criticism about the wound on the 25 centimeter Godzilla 72 from S Plus, again, maybe S Plus should have done what Mark Seng did. Made the wound where it's trickling down his face a little bit further, or maybe give it like a little shine where the wound looks fresh. You know, that's the only criticism I probably would give it. But then again, I do enjoy that figure. But Mark did a great job with the wound right here. And again, it's like a war cry. It's like war paint, you know. And you will argue that once Godzilla gets his wound, that's when he gets his second win and commits to doing the John Cena of both King Ghidorah and Gigan here. So it looks great. And I know you're probably wondering why they give him a shoulder wound, because Gigan did also slice his shoulder, whatever. To me, the most important wound when it comes to this version of Godzilla is the head. So I really didn't need the shoulder wound. As long as the wound on his head is correct, which Mark really got right on this kit here, that's all that really matters. So I think Mark did a phenomenal job. So from the paint job on his wound to the charcoal gray skin, the claws, the toenails, the dorsal plates, again the sculpt is shoddy, but again I think it benefits this Godzilla. It benefits how this Godzilla looked in Godzilla vs. Gigan. Some people don't like it. I love it. I think it adds charm. I think it adds character. It shows that this version of Godzilla has been through some great battles, and he has some Destroy All Monsters, Godzilla's Revenge, especially Hedra, and now here in Gigan. I think the dilapidated sculpt, at least the dilapidated condition of the suit, gives Godzilla character. And it's all that and more in this awesome kit of the Tengetsu Crafts 50cm Resin model kit of the 1971 Godzilla, aka the 1972 Godzilla. So that's pretty much it, you know what I'm saying, with the backstory and up close and personal. Again, I love this thing. And again, this thing stands out because, again, there's not too many realistic versions, giant-sized versions of the superhero Godzilla that's flown out there. Again, you have the Megaton from Marmot, but that is a stylized Marmot version of the superhero Godzilla. It's not realistic like this. So, again, if you're able to find this kit, and again, finding one is easier said than done. Marcellus Winters found one recently, so it's not impossible, you know what I'm saying? But if you're able to find one and you're able to have somebody build it, paint it for you, again, realize that it's going to require some surgery to get this thing done. But as you can see here, this is living proof that you can get it done and you can have it look like the 71, like it's originally supposed to be, or you can do my route and go with the 72. Either way, get your hands on this kit. You will not be disappointed. Yes, yes, yes. So, let's do, you know what? I'm trying to think about what should I do for like size comparisons, because honestly, I have a couple ideas that I want to pair with this version of Godzilla. Either this guy right here in the back, or maybe another version of Godzilla from the 70s, whatever. But you know what? Let's just do one size comparison. Let's do that one size comparison. Let's bring up a couple other versions of the anti-hero or villainous Godzilla from the Gigantic series. And let's see how this superhero version of Godzilla pair up with other incarnations of Godzilla in the X Plus Gigantic series. So let's do that one in size comparison right now. Okay, folks, here we are with the first and only size comparison, and yes, the man of the hour right there in the middle. The 50cm Resin model kit of the Tengetsu Crafts 1971 Godzilla, but again, I had it morphed into the 1972 Godzilla. It's flanked by two other versions of Godzilla in the Gigantic series scale, you know what I'm saying? Of course, to the right, we have the X Plus Gigantic series 1989 Godzilla from Godzilla vs. Blankenship. And of course, to his left, I have the M1 50cm rubber model kit of the 1964 Godzilla from my most favorite Godzilla film of all time, as you already know, Mothra vs. Godzilla. And as you can see here, this is a great size comparison, and this 72 Godzilla really sizes up well with these other giant versions of Godzilla. And again, going back to what I said earlier about the X Plus Gigantic series specifically, again, the only representations of Godzilla character-wise outside the MonsterVerse that we have are either villains or anti-heroes. And I have been asking and advocating and clamoring that they would do a 1970s version of Godzilla. And when they brought out the Gigantic series Mechagodzilla a couple of years ago, I so thought that the next version of Godzilla from the Gigantic series would be a superhero version, but instead they went with the 54. But I'm not losing out on hope. I still think they will do one at some point. And there's plenty to choose from. They can do the 74 to go with Mechagodzilla. They have teased that they're going to do a Gigantic series version of Gigan for the Showa period. So at least I'm halfway there with mine, you know what I mean? Or here's another idea. Maybe X Plus can get their hands on this sculpt and put it into the favorite sculptor's line, versus having to pay somebody to build and paint one from scratch. Because again, I think the sculpt of this guy is really, really cool. And it's perfect for that version of Godzilla, if you want to make one that will hopefully go with the eventually upcoming gigantic series version of Gigan that they tease. I haven't forgot about that, and I'm sure a lot of folks haven't forgot about that either. But until that happens, this is such a solid representation of Godzilla, and I'm so glad I got it coincidentally on the 50th anniversary of the film. You know what I mean? So that's pretty much it with the first and only size comparison. And again, it is so nice to finally have a gigantic size realistic superhero Goji in my collection. I can't thank Charles Blankenship and Mark Seng enough to make this happen for me. Yes, yes, yes. All right, so that's it with the size comparison. So let's go with my final commentary portion of the video with my final thoughts of the Tengetsu Crafts 50cm Resin model kit of the 1971/1972 Godzilla. So let's do that, ladies and gentlemen, right now. Okay, folks, I'm back with my final thoughts of the 50cm resin model kit of the Tengetsu Crafts 1971 Godzilla, aka the Godzilla 1972. Oh my god, this thing is amazing. 10 out of 10. I love this thing. I really, really do. Aside from the fact that, again, there's not too many realistic versions, gigantic size versions of the superhero Goji out there. You know what I'm saying? This is awesome. This is so amazing. Again, outside of the Marmot Megaton 71, there's not really too many realistic versions of this guy out there, or at least a superhero version of Godzilla out there. So if you're able to find this kit, because I think this is the only kit from a model kit studio of a giant size superhero version of Godzilla that's out there, you know? Hopefully that would entice and motivate other kit builders to start building giant size superhero 70s Gojis, you know what I mean? But you gotta start somewhere, and I think this is great. This is a great starting point. And this thing is amazing. And I'm kind of torn, really. I'm kind of torn at how I will display this guy, because he looks great, you know, by himself, you know. I sometimes display him with my Spiral Studios King Ghidorah, and yes, that's not the same King Ghidorah from Godzilla vs. Gigan. I know. But the visual of seeing them two together just brings me back to Godzilla vs. Gigan, where we see Ghidorah and Godzilla square off during a few times of that movie. So that's always a great option, you know what I'm saying? And plus, anything that I can size with Spiral Studios King Ghidorah, I'm always going to be a fan of, because again, that's the biggest thing in my collection, and not too many figures really size up well with him. You know, just a few. And I'm glad I could add this guy to the list, despite that not being the same Ghidorah from 1972. Of course, I have the S Plus Gigantic Series Mechagodzilla 74. Now, again, that's not the same. This is not the same Godzilla that fought Mechagodzilla in that film. I know that too. But for my old school fans out there, remember that old VHS tape cover of Godzilla vs. Mechagodzilla? You know, that artistic poster where we see Godzilla and Mechagodzilla square off over the Okinawa castle, you know, whatever. But if you look closely at that version of Godzilla, it's not the 74. It's actually the 72 or the 68. So you kind of can't get away recreating that old VHS tape, you know what I'm saying? And I love those tapes. I used to love the artwork on those tapes, you know? So I could kind of recreate that little tape, you know, with this version of Godzilla going up against the gigantic series Mechagodzilla, you know what I'm saying? Because he does size up well with the gigantic Mechagodzilla. So that's always an option. Or I could put this Godzilla with other versions of the superhero Godzilla from the 70s in my collection, whether it's the Monster Maker 28, 75, 74, the 25cm S Plus 73, and 71. You know, I can always use that. Or again, I can have him pose alone. Again, the possibilities with this guy are great. It's not too many of them, but the ones that I did round off for y'all are really great. And I'm kind of torn on what I would do. For the time being, he is up against my Spiral Studios King Ghidorah, which looks great. But again, it's nice to have options. You know me, I love setups, and it's nice to recreate or have options that you can set up with your various figures, you know what I'm saying? Where you can put this guy with this setup, put this guy with another setup, you know, and it's great. It really is great. Man, I am so loving this guy right here. Now, before I get up out of here, let me talk about Godzilla vs. Gigan just for a little bit. And again, you already know, I so love this movie. Again, it's my second most favorite Godzilla film of all time, despite its flaws, despite its issues, despite its complications. I don't care. That film is so fun to me. And that film is one of the films that has never lost its charm with me. A few Godzilla films over the years have kind of like have not aged well with me. Like those that fall into that category, 2000 has not aged well with me. Space Godzilla has not aged well with me, you know, whatever. But Godzilla Gigan has always been in my favor. I have always loved this film. I have loved it since the first time I watched it until now that I am an adult. And again, it's one of my most go-to Godzilla films of all time. Whenever I want to watch a Godzilla film, a random one, I don't know which one I want to watch, you know, because sometimes I have to be in a certain mood to watch a certain Godzilla film. But if I'm just really indecisive at that moment and don't know which one I want to pop in, normally I will pop in Gigan because, again, it is fun. It is so much fun, you know what I'm saying? And as an adult, and looking at this version of Godzilla, because again, this version of Godzilla, again, some would say they shouldn't even use this suit for the film because it's falling apart in certain scenes. It looks worn down. It looks dilapidated. It looks in poor condition. I get all that, and you're not wrong for feeling that way because it does look that way. But me becoming an adult and learning more about the backstage stuff in regards to these films, quite frankly, we should be thankful that we got a 1970s Godzilla era films at all, because so many different things could have happened where we would have not gotten a Godzilla 1970s era of films, you know, because again, TV was the most popular medium at the time in Japan, and that really affected the Japanese film industry, especially the Godzilla film industry, because ever since they turned Godzilla hero, the audiences for these films, in terms of box office performance, got smaller and smaller and smaller as the series progressed. Despite how fun and awesome the films are, really it wasn't drawn into big crowds anymore. And by the 1970s, things were even more harsh. So again, they had to go through all these different changes, and they had to go through all these hardships just to get these movies done. And so they had to resort to stop footage. They had to resort to stop music, you know what I'm saying? And I applaud it for doing that. Because the thing with the 1970s Godzilla films, they took what was so little and they made the most of it. Because you have to realize, and I think a lot of people really gloss over this, and this can't be understated enough. The 1970s films, the budget for these films were roughly half of the budget of a 1960s Godzilla film. So imagine, again, if you have a weekly budget where you go to the grocery store to buy your house and stock your house with food, but then the very next week you're being told, hey, by the way, your budget is cut in half. You know what I'm saying? You still got to go to the grocery store. You still got to do what you have to do to make sure your food is stocked, right? So instead of buying the name brand stuff, you buy the generic stuff. You buy maybe smaller quantities of bigger stuff. You know, you make do with what you have. That's my point. That they made do with what they had with the 1970s Godzilla films. And that's why I will always defend the 1970s Godzilla film. And especially this suit, because again, they were working with very little to get this film done in particular. Because I'm sure a lot of the budget went towards Gigan, because that was the newest suit of the film. You know what I'm saying? They didn't have much money to begin with, you know what I'm saying? But they did the best with what they had. And I will always defend that. I will always ride or die with that, you know what I'm saying? And again, despite its imperfection, despite its issues, you know, whatever, I still love this film. And for nothing else, this is the final suit for Haruo Nakajima. Yes, the guy that we would solidify as the pinnacle of Godzilla suit acting. When we think of the definitive suit actor, more or less a Godzilla fan would normally name Nakajima. And this was his final suit. So if nothing else, this suit is really important just for that fact alone. But again, the reduced budget, the fact that they had to resort to stop footage, the fact that they had to resort to stop music, the fact they had to do all these corner cutting in these special effects to get this film done, I applaud that, because they took what was so little and they made something so great. And again, that's why I will always be down for Godzilla vs. Gigan, as well as a 1970s Godzilla film as a whole. And this sculpture right here is the pinnacle of that. When I look at this sculpture, it just reminds me how great the 1970s Godzilla film was, or were, in my opinion. And again, it took a 1970s Godzilla film to make me a fan, because no matter how you get into Godzilla, it's all subjective. But for me, if you were to ask me if Godzilla was never really a hero, would I have latched onto the character as much as I have? And the answer for me is no. because I grew up in the 80s. I grew up with Transformers, Knight Rider, Voltron, GoBots, and all these larger-than-life, characters. And it took me seeing a superhero version of Godzilla for me to become a fan. So again, if Godzilla was never really a hero, would I become a fan? More likely not. So I owe a lot to this version of Godzilla. I owe a lot to the 1970s Godzilla films. And again, I will always defend them. I will always ride or die for them because they are just awesome. They took very little, but considering what we got out of it, we got something really special in that era of films, you know what I'm saying? But again, this is a great sculpture of the 1972 Godzilla. And again, there's not too many sculpts, or at least copies of this kit out there from what I understand. Like I said, I was told the number was 11. Don't know how true that is, but again, I don't know too many people that got this kit. Maybe one or two. So there's probably some merit to that. But if you're able to find one in the wild, or whatever, please go after this kit. You will not be disappointed, especially if you're a fan of the 1971 or 72 Godzilla. If you're a fan of both Hedra and Gigan, you owe it to yourself to add this realistic, gigantic size version of the superhero Godzilla in your collection. There's no question about that. Yes. So that pretty much concludes my review of the 50cm resin model kit of the Tengetsu Crafts of the 1971 Godzilla, but I had it morphed into the 1972 Godzilla, based on super cool appearance in my most second favorite Godzilla film of all time, coincidentally celebrating the 50th anniversary this year, 1972's Godzilla vs. Gigan. You have any questions, comment down in the comment section. Hit me on Facebook via Let's Be Chambers. We'll definitely go from there. Yes, once again, woo! I feel so great to have this guy in my collection. Between this, I also have the Monster Maker 28 30cm Gigan kit, So it's nice to have or get those pieces on the year where Godzilla vs. Gigan celebrated its 50th anniversary. And between the two, I'd probably say this would be my favorite piece from that film. Take nothing away from the Monster Maker 28 Gigan. That thing is amazing too. But because this thing is so unique, and because there's not too many versions of this guy out there, at least a realistic version of the superhero Godzilla out there, he's really more unique. And he stands out in my collection, especially with that wound right there. Because when you see this wound, you know exactly what Godzilla that comes from. So it's nice to have this unique piece in my collection. And again, thank you to Charles Blankenship. Thank you to Mark Seng for making this happen for me. And again, if you're able to find this guy in the wild, you will not be disappointed. Please add it to your collection, and you will be in hog heaven just like I am. You know what I'm saying? Woo! Man, it's been a minute since I put out a video, and I'm so sorry. I've just been real busy between my going on vacation, doing a couple things at work, whatever. I'm sorry for being kind of slow with the reviews, and I've been meaning to get this guy for the longest time. I really have. I've just been real busy. But thank you for those who have been asking for me to do this video. Thanks for those people who are still riding with me, whatever. I really do appreciate it, and I will get more content to you as soon as I can. And so thank you so much. I really do appreciate it. So this guy is amazing. This guy is so amazing. So I get to you finally, the 50cm resin model kit of the Tengetsu Crafts of the 1971 Godzilla, but it's the 1972 Godzilla from its epic appearance from 1972's Godzilla vs. Gigan. Yes. So thanks so much for watching. I appreciate it, and I will see y'all again on this figure move review. All right, y'all take it easy.
どこでも平和のためだ広い世界を駆け巡り目指すは悪い怪獣だでっかい体に可愛い目玉明日も戦う僕